To my beloved son Marcus, who never once visited me in my final 3 years, I leave my entire estate valued at $12 million, the lawyer read in a monotone voice, while I sat there in my paint-stained hospice volunteer shirt, the same one I'd worn every day for 3 years, sitting by what I thought was my dying father's bedside. Marcus hadn't even attended the funeral. He was participating via Zoom from his yacht in Miami, sunglasses on, probably drunk at 10 a.m., the background showing paradise while the rest of us sat in a gray law office in Detroit, but his smirk through the screen made me want to throw my chair through the wall. However, the lawyer continued, pulling out a sealed red envelope marked, "Open only after reading the first will." There seems to be an addendum that Mr. Morrison insisted be read after the initial will, and when he opened it, a photo fell out showing my father very much alive at a Cubs game dated 2 days ago, holding a sign that read, "The real will is in my safety deposit box. This was just a test." My name is Julia Morrison, and I just discovered my father faked his entire 3-year terminal illness to see which of his children actually loved him versus who just wanted his money. I'm 34 years old, a high school art teacher who spent every single day after work for the past 3 years driving 45 minutes to Mercy General Hospital to sit with my dying father, read to him, hold his hand while he was supposedly comatose, and tell him about my day even when the doctors said he couldn't hear me. Marcus, my older brother at 38, is a cryptocurrency entrepreneur who's been through 4 failed startups and 2 bankruptcies. The last time he'd seen Dad before his illness was at Christmas 7 years ago, and that was only because he needed a loan. When Dad announced his terminal diagnosis of a rare neurological disease, Marcus sent a fruit basket and a get well card. That was it. For 3 years. Our father, William Morrison, built Morrison Construction from nothing into the largest commercial construction company in Michigan. He was a tough man who believed in hard work, loyalty, and testing people's character. Growing up, he'd set up elaborate tests for Marcus and me, leaving money on the dresser to see if we'd take it, having friends offer us easy ways to cheat on tests, seeing what we'd do when we thought no one was watching. Marcus always failed these tests. I always thought they'd stopped when we became adults. I was wrong. The law office was cramped and smelled like old coffee. Besides Marcus on the laptop screen and me, there were 5 other people present. Dad's lawyer, James Crawford, Dad's brother, Uncle Pete, Dad's best friend, Big Tony, Dad's longtime secretary, Mrs. Henderson, and surprisingly, Dr. Rajesh Patel, who'd been Dad's attending physician for his fake terminal illness. "This is insane," Marcus said through the Zoom call, his voice distorted. "Open the envelope. What does it say?" Crawford adjusted his glasses, pulling out several documents. "The photo is interesting, but there's more. There's a letter here, dated last week." "Should I read it?" "Read it," I said, my voice hollow. 3 years. 3 years of watching him waste away, of crying myself to sleep, of putting my life on hold. Crawford cleared his throat and began. "My dear family and friends, if you're reading this, then my 3-year experiment is complete. Yes, I have been entirely healthy these past 3 years. No terminal illness, no dying brain, no coma. What I did have is a question. When everything material is stripped away, when there's no inheritance to gain, when there's only a dying old man who needs comfort, who shows up, who loves me for me, not for my money. Julia, my daughter, you came every single day. Rain or shine, after teaching teenagers all day, you drove 45 minutes to sit with your unconscious father. You read me 1,127 newspaper articles, 47 complete books, and sang happy birthday to me 3 times, even though you thought I couldn't hear. You told me about your students, your struggles, your small victories. You held my hand and told me you loved me 1,095 times. I counted every single one. Marcus, my son, you sent 1 fruit basket, 1 card, and made 3 phone calls that lasted less than 5 minutes total. When you were told I was comatose and couldn't hear anything, you never called again. You did, however, contact my lawyer 16 times to ask about the will and whether my estate plan was updated. To those wondering how I accomplished this deception, Dr. Patel is actually my friend from college. He's a psychiatrist, not a neurologist. The hospital room was a private suite I paid for. The nurses were hired actors. The medical equipment was real, but unnecessary. I spent my days comatose, listening to my daughter pour her heart out, and waiting to see if my son would ever show up. The first will, the one leaving everything to Marcus, was a test. I wanted to see everyone's true reaction. Julia, you didn't protest about the money. Your first words were, but I visited because I loved him. Marcus, you're probably already calculating your net worth. The real will is in my safety deposit box at First National. But before we get to that, there's something else you all need to know. I'm not dead. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward.
What?
Crawford looked as shocked as everyone else. He continued reading. I'm actually in the conference room next door. I've been watching this entire reading through a camera. I needed to see your genuine reactions. I needed to know if Julia would fight for money she thought she deserved or if she'd accept losing everything with grace. I needed to see if Marcus would show any remorse for abandoning his dying father, or if he'd just celebrate his windfall. Julia, you looked heartbroken not about the money, but about the idea that visiting me meant nothing. Marcus, you're probably checking out prices right now. Dr. Patel, please bring me in. Dr. Patel stood up, and I noticed for the first time he was trying not to smile. He walked to the side door, opened it, and in walked my father. My dead father. My father whose funeral I'd attended 3 days ago. My father whose hand I'd held as he supposedly took his last breath. He looked perfectly healthy. Better than healthy. He looked younger than he had in years. He was tanned, fit, and wearing a Cubs jersey. Hello, Julia, he said quietly. Hello, Marcus. On the screen, Marcus had gone white. His sunglasses were off now, and his mouth was opening and closing like a fish. You son of a bitch, Marcus finally managed. You absolute psychopath. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? What I put you through? Dad laughed bitterly. You mean the fruit basket you had your assistant send? The 3 5-minute phone calls over 3 years? Yes, Marcus. I can see how traumatic that must have been for you.
He turned to me.
I couldn't speak. I was crying, but I didn't know if they were tears of relief, rage, or confusion. Julia, he said softly, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I need you to understand why I did this. You let me believe you were dying, I whispered. For 3 years. I planned your funeral. I picked out your casket. I mourned you while you were alive.
I know, he said.
And that's the cruelest thing I've ever done. But I had to know. When your mother died 10 years ago, she made me promise something. She said, Will, make sure our children grow up to value love over money. Test them. Make sure they become good people, not just successful ones. So you tortured us? Marcus shouted from the laptop. I tortured Julia, Dad corrected. You, Marcus, were barely inconvenienced. You want to know the truth? The whole truth?
Fine.
5 years ago, you came to me for money to save your second company. You said if I didn't help, you'd kill yourself. I gave you $500,000. You spent it on a boat and a trip to Europe with your girlfriend. When I confronted you, you said I could afford it, so why did I care? Marcus was quiet now. That's when I started planning this. I wanted to know if either of my children loved me as a person, not as a bank account. The illness gave you both the perfect excuse. I couldn't do anything for you anymore. I couldn't give advice, couldn't write checks, couldn't solve problems. I was just a dying old man who needed comfort. And Julia showed up, Uncle Pete said quietly. Every damn day. And Julia showed up, Dad repeated. She talked to my unconscious body about her student Miguel, who was struggling with homelessness, but too proud to accept help. She cried about her ex-husband leaving. She shared her joy when her art was accepted into a gallery. She lived her life out loud in that hospital room, sharing it with someone she thought couldn't hear her. He pulled out a thick notebook. I wrote it all down. Every word. Every story. Every I love you, Dad. 3 years of a daughter's devotion documented in 1,487 pages. He turned to the laptop. Marcus, do you want to know what you said in your last phone call? You asked if I was conscious enough to sign documents. When told I wasn't, you hung up. Because what was the point? Marcus defended. The doctors said you were vegetables. Vegetative. I corrected automatically, then caught myself. Wait, no, he wasn't anything. This was all fake. Which brings us to the real will, Dad said, pulling out a document. James, if you would. Crawford took the papers with shaking hands. This was clearly not what he'd expected either. The last will and testament of William Morrison, witnessed and notarized. To my son Marcus, I leave the sum of $1 for every minute he spent visiting me during my illness. According to my calculations, that's $0. However, I also leave him something more valuable, the complete journal I kept of Julia's visits. Maybe reading about his sister's love will teach him something about family. To my daughter Julia, I leave the bulk of my estate, the construction company, the real estate holdings, the investment accounts, totaling approximately $12 million. But more importantly, I'm establishing the Julia Morrison Foundation for Art Education, funded with an additional $5 million, to help students like Miguel who she worried about every day. To Dr. Patel, who had to pretend to be my doctor and listen to Marcus's calls asking about my life expectancy, I leave $100,000 and my eternal gratitude. To Mrs. Henderson, who helped coordinate this elaborate deception while maintaining perfect discretion, I leave $500,000 and my vintage Corvette she always admired. To Big Tony, who visited me almost as much as Julia and never once asked about money, I leave my cabin up north and my boat, so you can finally retire and fish like you've always wanted. To Uncle Pete, who knew the truth the whole time but kept my secret and watched over Julia, I leave my father's watch and $250,000. Marcus's face on the screen had gone from white to red to purple. You can't do this. I'll contest it. This is fraud. Elder abuse. Something. Actually, Crawford interjected. Mr. Morrison has been regularly evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists throughout this period to confirm his mental capacity. Every document is ironclad. Every evaluation shows perfect mental health. This is unusual, certainly, but entirely legal. Julia hasn't said anything, Mrs. Henderson observed. Everyone turned to look at me. I was still crying, still processing, still angry, but also something else. You listened to everything, I said to Dad. Every single word? Every word, he confirmed. So, you heard me talk about my miscarriage. About Tom leaving me because I couldn't have children. About crying in my car before coming in to see you because I didn't want you to die thinking I was unhappy. Yes, he said quietly. You heard me beg God to let you wake up just once more so I could tell you about getting Teacher of the Year. You heard me plan dad-daughter dances I'd never have. You heard me practice the eulogy I gave at your fake funeral 57 times. Yes. And you just lay there? It was the hardest thing I've ever done, he said. So many times I wanted to open my eyes, to hug you, to tell you it would be okay. The day you talked about Miguel sleeping in his car, I nearly broke. You were trying to figure out how to help him without hurting his pride, and you came up with the idea of commissioning him to paint a mural, paying him enough to get an apartment. That's when I knew your mother would be proud of who you became. But Marcus isn't a bad person because he didn't visit, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. People grieve differently. People process illness differently. Julia, don't defend him, Uncle Pete said.
No, she's right, Dad said.
Marcus isn't evil for not visiting. But when I called him personally, yes, Marcus, I called you myself 6 months ago, disguising my voice, and said I was a nurse and that his father was asking for him. What did you say? Marcus was silent on the screen. You said, he's not conscious. The doctors said so. This is probably just reflex or something. Call me if he actually wakes up. Then you hung up. Because I was protecting myself. Marcus exploded. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your father waste away? I couldn't handle it. But Julia could? Dad asked. Julia handled it every single day. Julia's different. She's stronger or whatever. She always was Mom's favorite anyway. Your mother loved you both equally, Dad said firmly. But she worried about you, Marcus. She worried that your charm would let you skate through life without developing character. She was right. So this was all Mom's idea?
I asked. No, Dad said.
This was my interpretation of her wishes. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I should have just split everything equally and hoped for the best. But I wanted to know, needed to know, which of my children would love me if I had nothing to offer but my presence. Your dying presence, I corrected. You let me watch you die slowly for 3 years. Yes, he said. And I'll understand if you never forgive me for that. But Julia, those 3 years where you thought I couldn't hear you, those were the most precious years of my life. I got to know my daughter, really know her, in a way most parents never do. I heard your unguarded thoughts, your pure heart, your incredible kindness. He turned to Marcus on the screen. And you, son, you showed me who you really are too. Not evil, just shallow. Focused on the wrong things. Your mother's fear came true. So what now? Marcus asked bitterly. Julia gets everything and I get nothing? Is that your grand justice? You get what you earned, Dad said. Julia earned her inheritance with 1,095 I love yous and 3 years of devotion. You earned yours with 1 fruit basket and 3 phone calls. This isn't over, Marcus said. I'll sue. He disconnected from the Zoom call. The room was silent for a moment. Then Big Tony started laughing. Will, you magnificent bastard. You actually did it. 3 years. I can't believe you pulled this off. I had help, Dad admitted. The entire 3rd floor of Mercy General was in on it. Cost me a fortune, but worth every penny. Why the funeral? I asked. Why take it that far? Because I wanted to see who would come to mourn me, not my money. Julia, your eulogy was beautiful. You talked about my hands, how they were rough from construction work, but gentle when you were sick as a child. You talked about me teaching you to use power tools, even though Marcus said it wasn't feminine. You remembered the small things, the real things. And Marcus? Mrs. Henderson asked. Marcus sent flowers. The card said, sorry for your loss, addressed to Julia. He didn't even write dad or father. Just, your loss. I stood up, walked over to my father, my living, breathing, definitely not dead father, and slapped him. Hard. The room gasped. That's for 3 years of torture, I said. Then I hugged him, crying into his Cubs jersey. And this is because you're alive, I sobbed. You absolute asshole, you're alive. He held me tight, and I could feel him crying too. I'm sorry, baby girl. I'm so sorry. But I'm also so proud. You became exactly the woman your mother hoped you'd be. What happens now? I asked, pulling back. Marcus won't just accept this. Let him sue, Dad said. I have 3 years of documentation, witness testimony, and video recordings of every interaction, including him trying to bribe Dr. Patel for information about my real condition and life expectancy. He tried to bribe me? Dr. Patel said, surprised. Different Dr. Patel, Dad admitted. An actor. But Marcus didn't know that. Offered him $10,000 to accidentally overdose me on morphine. The room went cold. He wanted you dead? I whispered. He wanted his inheritance, Dad corrected. Whether I was dead or alive was inconsequential to him. Uncle Pete whistled low. That's attempted murder for hire. It's on video, Dad confirmed. Though I won't press charges if he accepts the will quietly. You're blackmailing him into compliance? Crawford asked. I'm giving him a choice, Dad said. Take the lesson and walk away, or fight and lose everything including his freedom. So what now? I asked. You're alive. You're here. Do we just pretend the last 3 years didn't happen? No, Dad said. We can't pretend that. But maybe we can make something better from it. Julia, you talked a lot about wanting to open an art therapy program for terminally ill patients. You said art helped you process grief. The foundation I'm creating in your name? It's specifically for that. Your ideas funded and ready to implement. You want me to forgive you by bribing me with my own dreams? I asked. I want you to forgive me because I'm your father And I love you, he said. The money is just me trying to make something good come from my deception. What about you? I asked. What do you do now? You're legally dead. About that, Crawford interjected.
He's not actually legally dead.
We never filed the death certificate. The funeral was theatrical. Everyone who attended was either in on it or told afterward. It was filmed, actually, for the eventual revelation. You filmed my grief? I asked, anger flaring again. I filmed your love, Dad corrected. The difference matters. Big Tony stood up. I think we should give them some privacy, he suggested. Everyone agreed, filing out except for Dad and me. When we were alone, Dad pulled out a thick album. These are the notes I took during your visits, he said. Every story, every worry, every joy. I want you to have them. I flipped through pages and pages of his handwriting, documenting 3 years of one-sided conversations. Julia worried about her student Maria today. I read aloud. She spent her lunch money on art supplies for the girl. Ate crackers from the vending machine instead. This is the 4th time this month. You never mentioned being hungry, Dad said softly.
You were dying, I said.
My hunger didn't matter. Everything about you mattered, he said. That's why I documented it all. So you could see yourself the way I see you. Generous, kind, selfless to a fault. And Marcus? I asked. What happens to him? That's up to Marcus, Dad said. He can accept this lesson and maybe grow from it, or he can stay bitter and shallow. But Julia, I need you to understand, this was never about punishing Marcus. It was about rewarding you. You chose love over money every single day for 3 years. I chose my dying father, I corrected. That's what children do. No, he said firmly. That's what you do. Marcus is proof that not all children make that choice. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked, was it worth it? The elaborate deception, the pain you caused, the risk of losing both your children. Was it worth it? Ask me after you forgive me, he said. That might take a while, I admitted. I've got time, he said. Apparently, I'm very good at playing the long game. Despite everything, I laughed. 3 years. You pretended to be dying for 3 years. You're either a sociopath or a genius. Can I be both? He asked with a small smile. Mom would have killed you for this, I said. Your mother would have understood, he said. She knew that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the greatest challenges. So, my gift was thinking my father was dying? Your gift was discovering that your love was unconditional, he said. Do you know how rare that is? How precious. Most people never get tested like that. They go through life assuming they're good people because they've never been challenged. You were challenged in the worst way possible, and you rose to it every single day. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. You knew, didn't you? You were in on it. I showed it to Dad. He thinks I was part of the deception. That's Marcus, Dad sighed. Unable to believe that genuine goodness exists. It's easier for him to think you were conspirating than to accept that you're simply a better person. I should call him, I said. Why? Because he's my brother. And because someone needs to tell him that being family means more than money. He won't listen. Probably not, I agreed. But I'll try anyway, just like I visited you every day. Not because I expected anything, but because it was the right thing to do. Dad squeezed my hand. Your mother would be so proud. Yeah, well, I'm still mad at you, I said. This was insane. Prull. Completely over the top. I know. I'm going to need therapy. I'll pay for it. For life. Deal. And I want you to actually teach me the business. If I'm inheriting a construction company, I need to know how to run it. I'd love that, he said, his eyes lighting up. And no more tests, I said firmly. No more deceptions, schemes, or elaborate morality plays. Just be my dad. My living, present, honest dad. I promise, he said. No more tests. I stood to leave, then turned back. Dad, during those 3 years, when I held your hand, did you ever squeeze back? He was quiet for a moment. Once, he admitted, you were telling me about your student Devon, who'd been shot. You were crying so hard, begging me to wake up, so you wouldn't feel so alone. I squeezed your hand, just a little. I knew it, I whispered. The nurses said it was involuntary, but I knew. That was the day I almost broke, he said. You needed me, and I had to pretend I wasn't there. It nearly killed me. Good, I said. Now you know how I felt for 3 years. As I left the law office, I passed a newspaper stand. The headline read, Local Business Magnate's Death Shocks Community. Tomorrow it would read something very different. Tomorrow, the world would know about William Morrison's grand deception. But today I had my father back. Flawed, manipulative, absolutely insane, but alive. And despite everything, the lies, the pain, the elaborate betrayal, I was grateful. Because in the end, he was right about one thing. Love isn't measured in visits or gifts or inheritance. It's measured in showing up when there's nothing to gain. And for 3 years, I showed up. The money, the company, the foundation, they were nice, but they weren't the real inheritance. The real inheritance was discovering that my love was genuine, tested, and true. Even if the test was completely insane.